Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show tonight. Yet another excellent episode. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Kristy Robinett about the afterlife. And in the second hour, we're going to have our good friend Frank Huguenard on talking about spontaneous healing. That's kind of like soul healing. And I would say, but not. But I think it is. Anyway, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, give me a call and we can set up a time for a private consultation. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And, in the beginning of the show, I talk a little bit about, my new book, E.T. Chronicles, or my video icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients. And I have to tell you, we got another really extra cool review on the video, and I'm just trying to find it. Here it is. And so this is from Gary, and it says, okay, and I'm keeping my head in so it's not too big. Absolutely fascinating and insightful! Exclamation point. How is it that with all of our technology and robust public education system, we did not know about these ancients, but also have no idea how or why they created such incredible feats of engineering and art? Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, available on Amazon.com. Still only $1.99 for a digital download. What a bargain. Okay, so we're going to be talking about signs and symbols, messages from the other side with Kristy Robinett. And let me tell you a little bit about her and get her on the air. At the age of 3, Kristy Robinett predicted her grandmother's death. When she was 8, the spirit of her deceased grandfather helped her escape from a would-be kidnapper. And it was then that Robinett realized that the other side wasn't so far away. Kristy teaches psychic development and paranormal investigating at local colleges, lectures across the country, and is a regular media commentator. She is the author of Forevermore, Guided in Spirit by Edgar Allan Poe, Messages Between the World, True Stories from a Psychic Medium, Higher Intuition's Oracle, Ghosts of Southwest Michigan, and Michigan's Haunted Legends, and her new book, It's a Wonderful Life. So please welcome to the show, Kristy Robinett. Hey, Kristy, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. You always have such great energy. I love being on your show.
Thank you. I try, but I can't imagine being any other way.
I know. I'm kind of like that too. I always tell this story when I worked in corporate world. I was actually written up because I was too smiley and cheery before the hour of 10 a.m. So that's in my personnel record and in some faraway filing cabinet in corporate life.
Well, that's interesting. I was written up for rolling my eyes.
Ooh, that's a little bit more sassy though.
Well, but for me, it's just an instinctive remark when someone lies to my face, especially being a psychic. It's like, you got that lie detector thing going
Yeah.
on. I'm sure you know.
I do know. Yeah, exactly. I think
But
I have a pretty good poker face with that, though. I just give them the mom look, like, I know that you know that I know.
Well, if it was someone that was seeing me in a professional capacity, it would be one thing, but it was somebody that was a customer and it was like, and not for my business. So, anyway, Kristy, what got you, and I'm going to say, into the medium business, moving out of corporate America?
Yeah, well, this was instilled within me since birth, and I really didn't know what it was that was instilled within me because I was taught that anything to do with psychics or ghosts or mediums or anything like that, that it was pretty much an evil thing. It was of the devil. And I never quite understood that because I could still see, sense, feel, hear, and communicate with, and I didn't feel evil. I mean, we all have those, naughty days, I guess, but I didn't feel like it was anything like I was going to go to some fire and brimstone type of a place. And I was going through a really, really rough divorce, and the visions, everything was sort of flooding back. The mediumship, the psychic was flooding back as my soon to be ex husband at the time left. So it was sort of interesting because you take the skeptic out of the formula, and all of a sudden it left this, ability for my guides and angels and past loved ones to sort of come visit me. And so it was overwhelming. And at that time, I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And I went to my minister and said, look, this is what's going on. I'm seeing and hearing and communicating with these on the other side. And I have since I was little, but I kind of went through a quiet time, and I did the normal thing of college, getting married, had kids, did the corporate thing. And as I was going through this confessional with my Missouri Synod Lutheran minister, a son of his that nobody in the parish knew that he had lost came through. And his son was quite young, and he had drowned. And he had drowned on the minister's watch, so to speak. His wife had been gone doing errands, and he was supposed to be watching his son, turned his back for a moment, and his son ended up drowning. And nobody knew that. And so when I brought his son through and said, I just need you to know that you need to forgive yourself, and he doesn't, he's not holding you accountable, and you've held this secret for so many years. His eyes kind of grew big, and he said, this is something that you're supposed to be doing because it brings peace. It's not what I teach on the pulpit, being that this is evil. And he did admit it. And so it took me a long time to do the kind of a theological jeopardy with him as well, where I was the skeptic and he was the acceptor. And he handed me a card of a local medium and said, I think that you need to speak with somebody who knows about this a little bit more than I do, and go get a reading. And to me, again, the way that I was raised, it was something just ridiculous. And my minister that I had trusted, that had married me, who had baptized my kids, who had, was helping me with the divorce counseling, was telling me to go get a reading. And I did. And I parked a couple blocks away, and I walked to the metaphysical center. And I did not want anybody to see that I was there. And not like anyone would, be like, hey, it wasn't that small of a town. So, this was my paranoia. And people still do, they do it to me too when they come to my office. So I know exactly what they feel. They're like, I parked 3 buildings over just in case. And I don't have the psychic, the flashing psychic sign on my office either. So I think it's really funny. But so I went there, and he closed his eyes, and he popped them open, and he said, Kristy, you see dead people? And I said, I do. And he offered me a job right there on the spot. And I did. I accepted it. And ironically, it was the best thing that could have happened. It was the worst experience working there, but it was the best experience with knowing what not to do and how to do it. But I ended up, there was a police station that was across the street from the center, and they would come over on their slow days and throw different missing persons and cold cases on my desk and say, help us. And they would test me. And I took that up as a challenge, and I loved every moment of that. And I then progressed that into working on psychic detective cases, quit my metaphysical center, opened my own office, and here we are.
Well, that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah. And I, I think that sometimes we have to go through, some of that fire and brimstone, so to speak, in order to find the light. And I found the light through all of that darkness that I had to walk through.
Well, but when we go through those kind of changes in our lives, wherever the area is, it often opens the door somewhere else for something else, because we're already in that change process, and there is no resistance because the world has come to an end as far as we know it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was the best thing. And I think that, not everybody is going to become a medium through, a frazzling type of a life account. But I think that if we're not learning, I'm kind of going off topic, but if we're not learning through these darker times, then we're not learning. We're not moving forward. We're just sitting there. And I'm sure you've seen clients, like that as well, that they're just spinning their wheels in the mud. Like, wait a minute, what's the lesson in this? Where are you supposed to go? Is this where you belong? And I decided to not do that because I had done that for so many years. So I didn't necessarily do it the right way the whole time, but I finally got to the process of, okay, I'm tired of not accepting who I am. I'm tired of the judgment, which we still get in this industry. But who am I hiding from? I'm hiding from myself.
Exactly. So let's get to the meat, because we had a lot of meat to cover tonight. And I'll start off easy. But what do you think happens to us when we die?
That's just such an easy question, right?
I told you I was going to start easy. We're dead. We go in the coffin. Bye.
What happens? Well, just like our birth story is unique, so is our death story. So I think that, there's so many different variables that actually are connected with that. And when I wrote this book, the reason why I wrote the book is because I wanted to show that there are so many differences. And in the stories that are in the book, they kind of go into a lot of the different variables. But when we pass away, and I call it the Heaven Chronicles in the book, when we pass away, we go through a many different series of steps. And first, we have to decide, because we've got free will, we have to decide if we want to actually go into the light, if we want to cross over into the light. That's the first thing. Or if we want to stay grounded. And, we see that a lot, especially in paranormal shows, as, they've got some sort of a haunting, so to speak. So if we go into the light, then we... See, this goes into, I've gotten into, I shouldn't say fights, but I've gotten into a lot of debates with people, as I discuss this, because it's like, how does it fall into the religious elements of things? And the way that I'm shown from spirits on the other side is that it fits within the formula of who and what we believe in. So do we meet, our loved ones on the other side? Absolutely. Our angels and our guides? Absolutely. And most of the time they help us cross over as well. Do we meet God if we believe in a God? Absolutely. Do we meet Buddha? Absolutely, if we believe in a Buddha. So it really is kind of, do we meet Satan? If we believe that we should be meeting Satan. So there's a lot of different variables with how you lived your life and how your vibration kind of plays into it.
Interesting. When individuals are going through that death process, many reports seeing, you mentioned the family and the guides, But many people will report or make comments about, oh, well, my mom is sitting over in that chair, or some loved one is in the room with them. And most people think that that individual is hallucinating. What's your thought on that?
Very rarely are they actually hallucinating. And I spoke to a lot of people in the medical community to get a logical type of a aspect of it, and not just the metaphysical. And they tend to go into a lot of description, especially those that have had neurological issues, whether it is Alzheimer's, dementia. They are just so near death. They're in their final steps. But hospice workers will often say that they will say, look, at my mom is over there and this is what she's saying, or my dad is. And they'll talk to the family members, and the family members will say, well, he's been gone for a long, long, long time. And they're there to help assist with help, reassuring them that they're there and they're okay, and that they will be okay as well when they do the crossover.
And so if there is someone who is working with someone, or a parent or whatever, who is in that transition process, and the parents make some comment about their mother or husband that has, preceded them, is there in the room, we shouldn't freak out or anything like that, that they should say hi.
Absolutely. I think the freak out isn't necessarily that the loved one's in the room in spirit, but that they know that their loved one that's lying in that hospital bed is going to be physically gone. And I think that's where the freak out often is. It's not that there's a, quote, ghost in the room. It's that we got to go through that whole final process, and then that grieving begins.
Yeah, good point. I wish that the medical community would get a little bit more on board with that whole concept, and not be, oh, well, they have lack of blood supply.
Right.
Try to come up with some explanation of the very crowded house you can end up with.
Yeah, the interesting thing here in Michigan, most of those in med school have to learn healing hands now, otherwise known as
Really?
Reiki. Yeah, it's part of their process to help with bedside manner, and they're also teaching them about energy. So I think that at one point, and hopefully, it'll continue to progress, that maybe they will understand it even further. I actually speak with a lot of med students. I've been asked by several different universities around here to talk to those that are just beginning in the process of becoming a physician, how I view the afterlife and the death process of it. So they're starting to not maybe understand it, but try to understand. And there's a great show on TNT now called Proof. I don't know if you've seen it. And it is by Jessica, what was her name? Jessica from Flashdance. The main girl, but it's actually, the season finale was on, I think, last night. But it has this guy. This has nothing to do with my book, so, but kind of. It has this guy who's dying, and he's got a brain tumor, and he wants to prove that there's life after death, because he wants to. He's a multi-billionaire. He wants to know where he's going, so he employs a heart doctor, a cardiologist, to help him with that. And she's gone through a different series of near-death experiences. So they start interviewing a lot of people with NDEs. And it's really kind of interesting to view this program and look at It's a Wonderful Afterlife and the connection with it, because there's a lot of connections. Because the NDEs often, there are people, those that have had the near-death experience, they're the ones that have been the closest to heaven, along with little kids. Hadn't been so long since they've been on the other side. So we get a lot of information from them as well.
So it sounds like you believe that when someone's having a near-death experience, they are actually going through the beginning phases of really dying.
I do. I think that they just aren't doing that crossover. The physical body hadn't completely decided to die, and their soul and their spirit left the body instead of the physical, the soul, and the spirit. So that there's a disjoint that's there.
So, talk a little bit about heaven. So, we die, we have the choice of going into the light or staying here on earth. So, let's say we pick door number A and we go into
It's
and
like,
we go
let's
into
make a
the
deal.
light.
Great.
What?
It's like let's the game show. Let's make a deal.
Well, at least there's no door number 3 because there was always a donkey behind it. So,
Us. There might be a door number 3. Yep. So if we decide to go, and do the crossover and go into the light, a lot of them have described it as a long tunnel. Others have described it as a stairwell, and others describe it as a doorway. And once they have crossed over that threshold, then we have to go through a soul review, or sometimes called a life review. And you see that a lot of times depicted in movies, where everything that's ever happened in your life, is flashing before your eyes, kind of like a movie theater. You're sitting in that movie theater and you're viewing everything that you've done, and the people that you've done good to and done bad to, and all of that just sort of come flooding back. And it's actually a teaching tool in order for us to understand life and for us to understand death, because as much as we live consciously here, we live consciously on the other side as well, which that's where the free will comes into play. After we've done that, we go through what I refer to as an angel boot camp. And the soul review helps us make decisions as to what we do next. Some might choose to reincarnate, while others might want some time to reflect on what they want to do, while others may decide that, heaven's where they want to stick around and they want to just kind of join the party with their loved ones on the other side that are still there as well, and take on some sort of a role that they're best connected to. And that's the one that I've decided when I cross over. I'm going to be sitting on a beach with my feet in there, and maybe a pool boy with me. So I'm unpacking, I'm settling down. That's what I'm doing. But no, so we end up, we have that opportunity to help others as well from the other side, and we don't have to reincarnate. So that's one of the questions I get a lot, especially from parents who have lost children, is will they reincarnate before I'm able to get there to reunite with them? And I've had different answers according to what their loved one on the other side has told me. So it depends on what that person on the other side decides to do. There's also something called a soul split, so they can kind of still be here and they can still be there. And that's kind of a difficult way to live as well. After we go through that, we live. We actually live. We have a life. Which I think is really awesome. There's no physical world. It's a perfect world. It's a perfect world that we imagine for ourselves. And the details throughout is what makes us happy. So if we've always wanted to live on a farm with a bunch of animals, we live on a farm with a bunch of animals. If we want to live in a congested city like New York City, that's what we're doing.
Okay, well, this will be interesting. You just wonder, like, okay, so what is my weird mind? I'll be on the bridge of the Enterprise, flying between galaxies. I don't know. I just don't know where that I'll end up being.
I actually explain it often because if you've watched Star Trek: The Next Generation, they have the hologram. They step through that into the hologram of they've got their perfect, partner, their perfect world, their perfect situation. And heaven is a lot like that episode where they are, in that perfect space. And so that's not so far-fetched from what, if you want to be on the Enterprise, you're on the Enterprise.
Sweet. So we have a question from California. See, it's one of them phonics things. But anyway, and her question is, so spirits that stay behind, are they ones that can't accept death?
Most often, yes. Or they are afraid of the judgment or the so-called judgment if they decide to cross over. There's other reasons as well, such as it was a traumatic passing, and they're still in sort of a stunned type of a phase, and they haven't realized that they can cross over, or they can't find the light. So I often say there's always a light on at a hospital. We've got death that happens all the time at hospitals, or you can go to a funeral home. So if any one of you gets stuck and you can't find the light, you know where to go to.
When my husband was sick and he was like, but I feel so bad. I just want to do something for you. And I looked him straight in the face and I said, I have one thing for you to do. And he goes, what? I go, when you go to the light. I'm like, do not pass go, just go to the light. And I just kept telling him that the entire time. Go to the light, Wayne.
Go to the light. He's in the light. You know that.
I know that. I know he went straight through. He was a man on a mission.
He knew you were going to kick him in the rear end if he didn't do it.
That's right. So. It's like he's around enough as it is. But on that note of being around, there are a lot of people that believe that when you die and you go to heaven, that you're stuck there. Like heaven's a jail and you can't ever leave. Is that true?
No, and that's what I was taught as well in my parochial upbringing. And that's why I think it's so confusing to a lot of people, that have had that parochial type of upbringing, because how can our loved ones be visiting us when heaven is so far, far away? So one, did they not go to heaven? Two, is there no heaven? So there's a lot of different questions that sort of complicate the whole thing. Here in this is a really stupid analogy, and it goes a little bit. You're in Texas, right? Mm-hmm. So you're a little bit of ways away. So here in Michigan, not too far from us, is a state called Ohio. We don't really like calling it a state because it's not. Those that are from Michigan get that. But there's a state called Ohio. And there's an amusement park there called Cedar Point. And so pretty much, think of Disney or Six Flags or anything like that. And you can get a fast pass, or you can get an armband that allows you to go to the front of the line. And heaven, if you've done the stops properly, you pretty much get that fast pass, and you're allowed to go back and forth in order to visit your loved ones. And you can, travel back and forth through the afterlife to this life, as long as you believe that you're vibrationally in a higher plane in order to do that. Do we get those visits from like the Ted Bundys or the Hitlers or such? I don't think we do. I don't think they get a fast pass. I don't think they get to go to the front of the line, which is a good thing for us. But no, so they are not locked up on the other side in heaven, singing in the choir all day long and playing the harp. It just doesn't work that way. We're living in a perfect world, in a beautiful world, and our beautiful world allows us to connect with our loved ones that are still in the physical world.
And I bring that up for a very specific reason, and you'll see where I'm going, because a lot of people think that their house is haunted or something like that, when really it's like grandma who's coming around to see the new baby. Could you speak to that for a second?
Absolutely. I'd say 98%, that large of a percentage, is actually, if there's some paranormal type of activity that's happening, light bulbs popping, electrical things happening, shadows, noises, footsteps, etc. I'd say 90, sometimes even 99.999, it's your loved ones on the other side that are just being really nosy and seeing what's going on in your life. And it has nothing to do with a so-called ghost. It's not like the Casper, the friendly ghosts. It's just not. They want to know what's going on. And so often we're so busy in our own lives that we forget to talk to the people that are around us. And we so often forget to talk about the people that are on the other side, because we do tend to have this, out of sight, out of mind thing that happens. We're sometimes so one-dimensional that we forget that. But they want to not be forgotten, and they want to, be around in our life and still living with us in our life.
Pesky.
They are. They're nosy. They're like, hey, what you cooking? For sure.
So if that's happening, are there ways, and I'm hoping we can spend quite a bit of time because you had so much material in your book on this topic, but are there ways that we can begin to recognize who's coming, if they're coming, separate out, is it mom or is it Uncle Fred, or, from who's coming around?
Yeah, sometimes that's the most confusing part, is like, well, okay, I'm getting the signs. I'm receiving the feathers, or I'm getting the dimes.
Well, maybe
but
we should
who
start
is it?
there. Maybe we should start there and then get more specific. So what kind of
Sure.
signs do people leave?
Oh gosh,
they're
so
here?
many.
See, that's
So
yeah.
many. Yeah. I mean, really, honestly, and I didn't even include, this book was twice the size that it is, and Llewellyn cut it down. Pretty much I'm obligated to give under 50 to 55,000 words, and I had 77,000 words. So I guess not quite half, but they really chopped a lot down. So I had to, limit it, and I'm hoping that there will be there's, it's still a wonderful afterlife, but music, we receive, songs on the radio, or songs through, walking through the mall or Target or what have you, and a random song comes on, the radio that may not necessarily be the popular song of the time, and it reminds us of a certain someone. They may have loved Elvis, and an Elvis song comes on, or Wayne Newton, and Wayne Newton comes on, and so we know that that's from that person. We should know that that's from that person. We receive objects and different trinkets from them. I don't know why we don't get $100 bills, but I actually had someone not too long ago where I always say that in my lecture, we get pennies, and quarters and dimes, and why not, $100 bills? And a lady raised her hand and she goes, but I do. And I said, you do? And she goes, I do. She said, my grandfather collected $100 bills, which nice thing to collect. And I was really sad, and I was out in the garden, and I said, Grandpa, I just want you to show that you're here. And she saw something move over by her flowers, and she looked, and there was a $100 bill crumpled up. And she says that hadn't been the first time. So, so we received those different trinkets. I have a story in there about a lady whose brother had passed away, and he always took an Aleve. And on the day of his funeral, she went to put her foot in her shoe, and there was an Aleve, and she never had a bottle of Aleve in her house ever. We receive signs of animals, hummingbirds, butterflies. There's a story in the book about a man whose dad had passed away, and he was in kind of a rural area, and it was soon after the funeral, and he was helping his mom situate things with the house, and all of a sudden a puppy came out of the woods, and they had acres and acres of woods. There's no way that this dog, could have run away and ran that far, and he went into town to see if someone had, in fact, because you try to go into a logical, mindset, and nobody had lost a puppy, and so they kept the puppy, and they knew that had come from his dad. We received phone calls from the other side, electronic disturbances. I have
phone calls would be a little creepy.
Yeah, do you know that that's actually really, 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 really one of the highest stories that I get from people is they get, especially a few days after the funeral, they'll receive a phone call from like nobody, and they can hear just a lot of distant noise and sometimes a voice that sounds like they're familiar, their loved one, but it's not like, hey, how are you doing? It's kind of very distant. And hey, Steve Jobs is on the other side, so I say he's trying to hook up all the electronic equipment there for us. So it's good. Yeah, and we get the spirit encounters. We get the seeing somebody on driving, looking, and then seeing somebody that looks like our loved one sitting in the car, and then they speed away. There are rainbows, and I have a lady who received an email from her loved one. There's just so many different ways that we can receive signs and symbols from our loved ones. And I think that so often, like I said before, we're in this state of, we got to do A to get to B to get to C to get to D. And we're so focused and on our day that we're too busy to look around to see that there really is another, part of the afterlife around us.
And these signs, how long can they last for, just in and around the period of their death, like maybe 30 days, or can it extend way past that?
Oh, it can absolutely extend, until that person, the one that's missing them passes on. And then it's sort of an inherited sign and symbol that continues down generations.
Can you explain that a little bit? I think I hear what you're saying, but can you explain the inherited symbol that passes down through generations?
Yeah, isn't that cool? So I had a lady a client of mine who they would always have pictures of their ancestors, up on their mantle. And Christmas Eve, every single year, they would get up and the pictures of their ancestors would be either rearranged or they'd be down or what have you. And her mom said it happens every Christmas. We used to have all these gatherings Christmas Eve, and we always felt like that is, our loved ones that are just saying hi and they still want to be included. Well, this lady is now in her 80s. And it has continued on. And they thought at first, oh gosh, someone's doing this on purpose. It's like a Santa Claus thing. Someone's getting up and rearranging them. But they actually set up cameras just to make sure. And in the camera, and it's really, really kind of cool. In the camera, you just kind of see this white wisp and you see these photos fall or they just start scooching, and it's the answer. It's like honestly, it's like it's passed down generation. I think they said it's like the 6th generation of their sign and symbol that their loved ones are still partying with them on Christmas Eve.
That's cool.
Kind of crazy, kind of creepy. That one,
I know, kind of creepy, but cool. Like, okay, it can happen at somebody else's house, and you can tell me about it, but don't do it.
Exactly, precisely.
What about the concept of a deceased person, especially right after their death, sitting on the edge of your bed or standing in the doorway? Your imagination, or are they sitting on the edge of your bed or standing in the doorway?
See, I firmly believe that, our brain is so much more unused than it really should be, and I believe we all have a mediumship and a psychic capability within each one of us. And I think that when the afterlife is so new, the other side is so fresh, that they often can sort of supercharge that side of the brain. And there has been so many different reports, and I believe I've got a story in the book as well, where they've fallen asleep and they've woken up and their mom or their dad is sitting on the end of the bed, and like, wait a minute, how did you get home from the hospital? What's going on? And and then, they shush them, disappear, and then they receive the phone call that their loved one had passed on. It happens all too frequently. So we do receive those so-called full-blown apparition visits from our loved ones. Mostly we receive the visits or the dreams, and those can happen anytime from right after we've had that loss to, 30 years later. after the loss. I see so many people who get upset because, my sister has had the visit with mom, but I haven't had that visit with mom. Did she love my sister more than she loved me? And so sometimes there's some hard feelings, and that most of the time is like, no, she did not love your sister more than you. She's either sleeping better, she's not taking medication that's preventing her from getting through, or she's sending you a different type of a sign that you may be missing, that you probably are missing, to show that she's around you as well.
So I'm going to go back to the question I asked a little earlier of, you're receiving these signs, and is there any way to kind of sort out who they're coming from?
Most of the time, the sign has significance to the individual. So if mom always loved ducks and all of a sudden there's a bunch of ducks that are on your doorstep and you don't live anywhere near a pond, we'll take that as not a coincidence, and that's mom saying hi. Or the music, the song, that's going to make sense as well. Sometimes the trinkets are a little bit more complicated, but I tend to tell my clients, who have they been thinking of lately? Who have they been missing lately? And then all of a sudden they kind of receive a random sign. That's more than likely who that sign is from, because in a way, they've dialed the phone to the other side by that missing. So if they've been thinking more of grandpa than grandma, then it's more than likely the rainbow is a connection to grandpa. I actually like to tell people to be specific with regards to asking for specific signs from their loved ones, so there isn't any, who is that from? So, if you don't know what your sign is, be specific. Mom, I'd like you to show me, X. Dad, I'd like you to show me Y. And then, kind of don't force it, and choose something that's a little bit unusual. Don't be like, show me, a butterfly, and you've got a butterfly garden in your backyard. So you want to make sure that you have something very specific, such as my husband, he sees a specific color of dragonfly when it's his dad, and it's not just, a dragonfly. So the more specific, the more that your logical mind will be able to say, okay, that is my sign.
Cool. Great advice. You made a comment, I'm just going to paraphrase here, who is the person that you've been thinking about? Are we able to, through our intention, kind of send the vibe out? When I think about something like that, because I kind of do this, I think of the James Taylor song, You've Got a Friend, and the lyric goes, you just call out my name, and wherever I am, I'll come running. And I feel like with our friends and relatives that have passed, all we really need to do is call out their name and they'll come to us. What do you think of that idea?
Absolutely. And I absolutely love that analogy with the song, because that's exactly, and you don't even have to verbally say it. You can say it in your in your head. I have a client who's a really good friend of mine as well, who lost her son, and he was in his 30s, and he ended up having a rare heart condition. And I said to her, anytime you're sad, just talk to him. You can talk in your head, you can talk out loud, just talk to him. And she said, okay. So she started talking to him in her car, and she was really, really mad about a situation and mad that he wasn't here to help with that situation. And she said she was just talking and her hands are going, and she's at a light and she feels somebody looking at her, and she turns over to the side and there's a guy, in the car staring at her, and then, put his hand up and gave her the Looney Tunes sign. And I'm like, seriously, you could have had a Bluetooth in, it makes no difference. And who cares? Because she was really upset that this guy thought she was nuts. And I'm like, who cares? Who cares? Did you feel better, after talking to him and getting upset? And she's like, I did. Who cares what everybody else thinks?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't anymore. I used to. I don't anymore.
Did you ever get any feedback from her? Does she feel her son coming around her now?
She does. And that's what's so awesome is I love doing what I do in my office, but I also love letting them know that they don't need the constant reassurance from somebody who's in the metaphysical field. They need to start trusting themselves through fielding those signs and symbols and feeling the comfort that they get when they receive them. They don't we so often we need the validation, and I get that to a degree, but you don't need that constant validation. You just don't. That's when you start losing pieces of yourself. So if you can say, okay, I trust that that feather that I received is, from my daughter, and someone says, well, how do you know it? You start to doubt yourself, right? So instead, be a little bit more, persistent with your own belief system. You don't need to prove it to anybody else. If that's bringing you comfort, then good for you. It does no harm.
And I agree with that statement. I don't understand why people have so many issues with the whole thing. This is totally off topic, but I was doing a piece on ghosts, but I like studying mythology. And one of the things, what the piece ended up being about was, why do we validate or venerate gods who, according to scientists, are figments of our imagination, but we don't talk about ghosts? Why aren't there any famous ghosts other than Holy Ghost in the historical record?
Right.
And, so my commentary is because the gods were real and ghosts are always ethereal. So I don't know where I was really going with that.
I think
it's interesting how far back in time, I guess this is the comment, how far back in time the notion of ghosts exists. So here's just, for your Trivial Pursuit thing. The earliest mention that I have found of ghosts in the historical record is from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was 2500 BC, where Enkidu was getting ready to die and he didn't want to become a ghost.
Wow, that's heavy.
I don't know it wasn't really happy in the story at that point in time, but just the acknowledgement that they had a understanding of what ghosts were, and he didn't want to be one.
Well, yeah, and even in the Bible, when Jesus, arises and and he's like, I am not a ghost, I am here. So obviously, they know what that is. And you even go way back in the time, with, Lincoln and with, our presidents, and go to Washington, DC. And it's often said, that the White House is one of the most haunted, houses in, America, if not the world. So much death and sadness and so much, strife and history there as well. And there's been so many different sightings there too, from those that are, quote, logical, intelligent beings. And it's not people running around, screaming Casper the Friendly Ghost everywhere.
But see, when I talk about family member ghosts that come around, I call them Casper ghosts.
That's
because
funny.
They're friendly.
Yeah.
Because they're friendly ghosts versus the not so friendly earthbound spirit kind.
Yeah.
Who are usually nasty and cranky.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about, the difference between a haunting, or a presence in a house where, they've gone through the light and it's a family member, versus someone who is more of an earthbound spirit? Because do you notice that there's a different kind of feeling that you experience when you encounter one of them in the room?
Yeah, to me, I do, absolutely. It feels more unsettling. And even though I can see them, whether it is someone that has crossed over or somebody that's more grounded, I still get kind of spooked every once in a while, unless I'm in my office doing a session, but in the middle of the night, which I often get them, waking me up and saying, hey, I need, you to help me with this, or I need this message to get passed on. I still get freaked out. Like, is this really real? But yeah, I have a little bit of a different feeling. I think people feel more unsettled by it. There is more of a persistence. Some people may actually, connect it to a poltergeist, which is a noisy ghost. So there's more of this frustration that you sense from them, a little bit more of an unnervingness, because it's like they're trying to finally get noticed, and it's not just to comfort you, it's because they need somebody to help them, to assist them with something.
Yeah, I've had several mediums on the show, and I'm not going to name drop, but I asked them the same question, but it seems like where you're coming from is very different. And their comment was they only communicate with people who have gone into the light and gone through the soul review. But it sounds like you are able to communicate with both ones that have gone through the soul review and are just kind of hanging around, and ones that are also earthbound spirits. So what makes that be different for you? Or three different people, three very well-known mediums I've asked that same question to.
Yeah, I'm just weird.
Well, that's maybe why I like you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. No, I really am. I've had, along with, like you, well-known mediums who've said, you see those that haven't crossed over? And like, yeah, I do. And I think that the reason why I do is because it's my mission to assist them in crossing over into the light. And then you've got like Marianne Winkowski, who were the Ghost Whisperer was created, through her story. She only sees those that are grounded, that have not crossed over. So she kind of has the opposite, where has no idea how to communicate with those after they've had that life review. So I think everyone has a unique type of a gift. I grew up in a very haunted house with spirits that had not crossed over. So that might be a part of the difference with the way that I do things, but I help a lot with paranormal investigators, which is kind of like taboo because you're not really supposed to use mediums, it's supposed to be very scientific, like the Sci-Fi Channel. But I work with a lot of different teams around the United States because I can kind of tell, even through their documentation, whether it is video or photography or what have you, if their entity that they're dealing with has been crossed over, or if it's an earthbound spirit. There's a different feeling. There's a different, even the photos and everything look different to me, so I can kind of tell. And it's the same thing when I work on paranormal, or on I can speak. Police cases. I can look at a photo pretty much and tell if they are missing or if they're dead and missing. So there's a flatness to them for me. And it's the way that I've kind of trained myself, I guess.
So this is a question from Carol in the chat room. And she would like to know how long it took you in your personal experience to trust that it was a spirit visiting you and not your imagination.
I don't think I've ever thought it was my imagination. And although I will tell you, and I in my book Messenger Between Worlds, I tell this story when everything was flooding through at that time, and I went to go see my minister. I also went to go see a neurologist, and because I thought, okay, there's got to be an explanation for this. I've got to have a brain tumor, something. And the neurologist did a ton of tests on me that I'm sure Blue Cross loved. And he called me into his office about a week and a half later. And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is calling me into his office. I have to have something seriously wrong with me. And he said, Kristy, you are a medium. And this is a guy that's from a very, very prestigious hospital here in the Michigan area that's looked over worldwide. And I looked at him really honestly like he had just turned into an alien. And he handed me a book on astral travel, remote viewing, and mediumship and said, you need to read this. And I think it'll help you feel more comfortable with your gift because you keep thinking that it's something worse than that. And I'm going to start crying. I don't know why, but I just kept getting put into the place where people believed me. And it was myself that, like I started in the beginning. I was the one that wasn't believing myself. Everybody else was believing me. So I think that I've just come to a point where I just know that it's not my imagination. And there's verification and there's validation that comes from it as well. There's times, though, that I'll see somebody, in the mall or in a large place and he's staring at me and I'll be like, why is that guy staring at me? And my husband will be like, what are you talking about? So
I'll let that guy over there,
yeah, and
that
he'll
regular
like,
thing.
oh, what are you talking about? So it does sometimes. I guess I do. I don't think it's my imagination, but I don't question my sanity either. I've got some great people that I love that's in the medical community. Who's in the psychiatric community who have vouched that I'm not completely nuts. I might be weird, but I'm not nuts.
Okay. We have about 4 minutes. Weirdest sign you've heard about? Weirdest story? What's the weirdest? And I don't care where we go with this. Just the weirdest story. Weirdest sign that you've heard someone receiving?
Oh my gosh.
I know there's a whole bunch, but your favorite one.
That could be like a whole book. I don't know if it's the weirdest. It's probably my and it's in the book as well. It's probably my favorite. I'll go with my favorite. This girl, her mom was passing away, and as her mom was passing away critical in the hospital, she received a phone call from a bridal store saying that her wedding dress was ready. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not getting married, just got out of a really bad relationship. There's no way it's mine. And they're like, this is your name, this is your number. And she's like, yeah. So she's like, please don't bother me. My mom's passing away. I can't deal with this. So her mom, said, I'm going to take care of you. And I want you to have somebody that is going to love you. And I don't want you to be alone and all of this. And she's like, yeah, whatever, Mom. So Mom ended up passing away. And obviously she was devastated. And so it was about not too long after her mom passed away, she ended up meeting somebody who was like her type. Completely ended up being an interview. She interviewed this person to work in her office and ended up being like the perfect guy. And he proposed, and she's like, gosh, Mom sent him to me, but I'm really afraid. They ended up just having an informal wedding, and she says, well, I do want a wedding dress. She went to the bridal shop, completely forgot that she had that phone call as her mom was transitioning, and the lady kind of turned ghost white and said, I still have that wedding dress I called you about. And she's like, oh my gosh, and it fit her like a glove. So whether it was her mom before she crossed over, she did something, or on the other side, she did something. I don't believe in coincidences. So she knew her mom was with her on her wedding day.
But that's so cool. I mean, if you even think about your own life, I mean, all right, maybe I just have a weird family, but we always had stuff like that happening. I mean, my sister got a pair of earrings from my grandmother when she was getting ready to pass. And she's like, I got the haunted earrings. And I'm like, what do you mean the haunted earrings? She goes, yeah, remember when my grandmother had lung surgery. She's in the hospital, and my grandfather has a massive heart attack and passes away. And she finally gets home. 2 days later, there's a ring at the door. She opens the door. It's this guy delivering these diamond earrings.
Wow.
The haunted earrings.
That's awesome. And I had, someone say, well, are you sure these just aren't coincidences? I just don't believe in coincidences. And I believe that our loved ones on the other side will move mountains to make sure that we know that they're around us. We just have to be aware.
Kristy, if somebody wants to get a copy of your book, and people, this really is a good book, easy to read, but I don't know. I loved it. Anyway.
Thank you.
It's a Wonderful Life, Inspiring True Stories from a Psychic Medium. If somebody wants to get a copy, where's the best place?
Amazon.com has it. You can just put my name in, Kristy Robinett, and you'll see the list of books that I've written. My website, KristyRobinett.com, BarnesandNoble.com. And I love our little bookstores that are really having a hard time right now. You can always go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it for you as well and give them some business too.
Okay, and one last quick question. If somebody wanted to have a session with you, is that possible?
Sure. I'm booking into March, I believe, right now.
Get out of town.
Yeah, I'm really blessed. And we're working on a TV show as well. So we're hoping that will be going off very soon. But on my website, KristyRobinett.com, you can see upcoming events and you can see available appointments.
Great. Well, I know the music's going to come up, Kristy. So thank you so much for coming on the show and spending your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. You have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Kristy.
Bye-bye.
That's Kristy Robinett. Her website is KristyRobinett.com. The book is It's a Wonderful Afterlife. And we'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.